My name is Angie Bush. I am a director of imaging. First, in the hands, who are my biomed? Just so I know who my audience is. Okay, imaging. All right, any IT people? Okay, good, thank you. IT and biomed, thank you very much. So a little bit about me. I've been in imaging since 90, I guess, 1990. I am a U.S. Air Force trained X-ray tech. So I started off in the Air Force. My pleasure, my pleasure. So when this topic came up and this opportunity came up to talk about the topic, this was actually timely for us because we had just gone through an exercise at our hospital. And it's funny, COVID just lingers. It just lingers. And the things that you learn from it just kind of continually keep manifesting. Who would have thought the entire world would shut down? Literally, before we had COVID, did you ever really think the world would shut down? But it did, and it shut down for months. And even years later, we're still trying to get back to some state of normal. But back in that, before that ever happened, that was something that leaders and yes, people in the military would talk about. What would we do? What would we do if the world shut down? Especially in the military, they think about these big, audacious, never events. And then, years later, guess what? The world did shut down. And it shut down in a massive way. One of the things that kept my CEO up at night was the next big what if. What if we had no network? What if our machines were hijacked? What if I have 800 patients in beds right now? How are we going to take care of them? So I got a phone call, got an email from a project manager, said, hey, the CEO's tasking every director to tell us what your plan is for a cyber attack. And I'm just going to tell you exactly what I did, and you imaging directors probably did the same thing. Oh, I have a downtown policy. Here it is. That's my downtown policy. I don't have to do any more work. I have enough work to do. This is my downtime policy. And then I went home, being the military person, thinking, okay, would that policy really work? What do I need? I don't know anything about a cyber attack. I'm not IT. How serious is this? How much at risk we were? So long story short, that the CEO came up with this, and it kept us up at night. So finally, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to start fresh. I'm going to throw this out because this is not going to work. And let's just get everyone together and talk about the what if. What are our risks? So we took it kind of like in a never event scenario, and we started gathering key stakeholders. And I'm so glad, like I said, we had to gather more than just the people in this room, more than biomed, more than IT, more than imaging leaders. We actually had to come up with workflows for the ER, for the OR, for the inpatient, for the outpatient clinic, and actually start having crucial conversations, which I think that was the best part of this, was that we actually had the faculty in the room. We actually had the faculty in the room and talked about how are you going to work. It was the first time in our system that we gathered so many people for a brainstorming session. And we were the blind leading the blind, but everyone in that room had a voice. And that's where I feel very comfortable with this process. My system feels very comfortable with this process. It's going to be ugly, it's going to be painful, but it can work. Yes, sir.
Just for scope, are you talking about cyber attacks that are stealing the attack, or a cyber attack where we're designing service to be able to use the
network? We're going to talk about network, and actually, thank you for bringing that up because we're going to talk about the different types of cyber attacks and where this project fell into place. So first of all, what don't we know, and how much are we really at risk? So I did a little bit of studying before. Healthcare is actually, once we started getting into it and found, and IT people were talking to the operators and so forth, we're very much at risk. And one of the reasons, or some of the reasons that we're very much at risk in healthcare is patient information is worth a lot of money. It's worth a lot of money. Medical devices are easy entry points for attackers. Do you know they can even attack a pacemaker? They could. It is possible to attack a patient's pacemaker. Staff need access to the data remotely. We were just talking about Luann in the back. We were just talking about Now there's software out there where you can remote operate an MRI scanner. You can remote operate a CT scanner. So the more accesses that we open up in healthcare, we have more entry points. Workers don't want to disrupt the convenient working practices to introduce a new technology. Those firewalls, those IT firewalls that are a pain in our bottoms, every time they do the refresh and, you know, throws our system out of whack, they're doing it for security, yes, but it interrupts our day-to-day operations, so we don't want to do it. So in healthcare, we have put our work in taking care of our patients, we have put so many obstacles to be safe, and we don't want to do it. I'll be honest with you. Most of us don't want to do it. Okay, so we're not also educated about how to say, staff aren't educated to online risks. So how many people here have opened an email that maybe you get an email that says that your order for Amazon did not go through, please click here to finish your order. And who orders Amazon like on a daily basis, right? Right. And so it seems very legit. Oh, I need to click on this hyperlink to finish the order. Guess what? You just got phished. And what if you do that on your work computer? They're so sneaky in the way they can get to us. And again, online, our staff are just not educated. And even if you are educated and you stand out at the warnings, we are still vulnerable because of the things that we do in our life. Like I said, Amazon, okay? The number of devices used in the hospital makes it hard to stay on top of it. Biomed, right there, right? How do you stay on top of it? Healthcare information needs to be open and shareable. MyChart. Patients want access to their images in MyChart. Patient wants their reports in MyChart. Outdated technology means the health industry is unprepared for attacks. So the first thing we started, and I'm going to say this a couple different times, the first thing we did was did an entire inventory list of every piece of equipment, medical equipment in our hospital. What Windows software are they on? Right there. That was the number one thing, because we had CT scanners, we had portable machines that were on software that was old. And so guess what, those directors here, that is a great way for you to get capital money. If you can't upgrade the software, you have to replace it. And you use the words to your CEO, we are at risk for a cyber attack on this CT scanner.
I'll save you money.
Okay.
And the cybersecurity advisory group for Health and Human Services is the Health Sector Coordinating Council, HSCC. And I lead the group that will be publishing a paper next week. It's 8,500 pages long, detailing exactly how to address cybersecurity of legacy equipment. Don't have to replace it. So
Okay.
there'll be a paper out next week. Google HSCC cybersecurity. Look for the legacy devices.
Can you write? I was saying, yeah. Thank you, because that's what the vendors are telling us. And then don't tell anyone about it. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That is amazing, because I literally, vendors have told us that that's the only thing we had a choice to do. So, but I was also old, so it's okay. COVID, believe it or not, during COVID, the cyber attacks actually increased quite a bit because of the development of the vaccines. These were a couple of things that happened during the COVID vaccine development. A Czech hospital was attacked, completely halted their network. Ransomware attacks on vaccine trial groups in the UK. Cyber attacks in the US Health Agency. Cyber attacks on a construction company that was building the UK's emergency COVID hospital. And allegedly, there were even state-sponsored attacks on UK, US, and Canada who were developing vaccines. Talk about, we said earlier, one of the big reasons that we are at risk in healthcare is information is very valuable. Healthcare, when we were during that vaccine development, the cyber attacks increased dramatically. So going back to what we were saying a second ago, there are different types of risks when it comes to cyber attack. This is one of the things that our IT colleagues educated me to. Risk categories from the cyber attacks, I'm sorry. Medical malpractice, obviously. If you can't access the EMR and you can't get all the patient's information, you don't know what they're allergic to, if they're gonna have a reaction, have they had something done or not done. So we have increased risk for medication errors. Data privacy, possible HIPAA violations. Property and reputation. can impact future business negotiations. So if your community knows that you've been cyber attacked, what is the trust of your community going to be in that organization afterwards? And then cost and expense. Obviously, if you're going to pay the cyber criminal to get back access to your device or your network, you're going to fork out some serious money. And then also, once you've been cyber attacked once, your risk, you're going to learn for the first time, okay, I need to invest in this. I need to make sure all my software is up to date. I need to make sure that my staff are engaged or educated on the risk. And maybe you even start shutting down some of those holes where people can get in. So there's lots of risk categories.
Speaking about risk.
Yes. Please. No, please.
How does IT measure risk?
How does
IT? It's not quite the same as imaging or clinical engineering. For IT, they say you would never pay more to prevent something from happening than it's worth. So you wouldn't buy a safe for more than $10,000 to protect $10,000 of cash. So IT approaches risk a little bit differently. They'll accept the risk up to a point if it would cost more to insure against it.
Interesting. Well, it makes sense though, from a financial standpoint, yeah.
Vastly different mindset than trying to blow the ocean. Let's fix everything. It's let's just fix the things that are economic.
So that also then opens up those other categories though. How much is it worth to you to build a reputation? You know, if you're in a market that's very competitive, like the Houston Medical Center, you know, all it takes is one event and your name is going to be mud. Thank you. No. Oh my gosh. I was going to ask that next. So a little bit. So first of all, so that's kind of like the background. So is it a real issue? Yes, it is. Is it a real issue?
Yes. Yes.
Do you ever want to go through it again? So as a director, I'm a system director for imaging. So the way our scope works for UTMB, we have 5 hospitals. You're seeing 4 here, but there's also a prison hospital attached to the one in Galveston. So I'm the director of imaging for the whole system. So when we come up with a plan, we had to make sure that it would work in each one of these type of areas and locations. It can't be, this is the plan for Galveston, this is the plan for League City. It needs to be systemized. And that's, again, where the military comes back. You want consistent, reproducible processes that everyone knows what's supposed to happen. On top of that, there's dozens of little clinics, urgent cares that have an x-ray unit here, an ultrasound unit there. So we really had to think about this scope. So we got everyone together. And when I say everyone, almost everyone got together on this. We had from the faculty side, we have 25 staff faculty, 4 PBLs, we have 31 residents. We have a fellowship program, about 228 imaging staff members across all the campuses. We perform at UTMB about 397,000 exams annually, but the radiology group actually reads for other places as well. So they read for 433. So we wanted to really understand, okay, is it going to work for all of us? So first thing first, we got the people together. Who needs to be at the table? Yes, we did have representation from like the lead techs of every modality. We got radiologists. They had to be at the table. And so we have specialty radiology reads. So the chest section reads chest, the body section reads body, MSK reads MSK. So we had to have a representation from every section. The pediatric section, guess what? There's only 2 radiologists in pediatrics. Do you think that one of them needed to be at that table? Because they read all PDs for the entire system. Yes, we had IT, we had biomed, we had our leadership team. But you know what? We also had ER nurses. We had ICU nurses. We had the nurse practitioners on the floor. We had Rev Cycle. Would anyone have thought of having Rev Cycle in the room to have this discussion? Because if you're going to be shut down for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, do you really think it's feasible to keep your doors open and not be dropping bills still? Okay, so these are the stakeholders at the bottom that really did not want to participate. I'm just going to tell you right now, they did not want to participate, and it took a lot of relationship building to get them at the table so that they could vet this process out. We also had to explain, because just like I had that knee-jerk reaction, that I have a downtime policy. I don't need this to do this work right now. I have so many other things going on. Please take this away. Just accept this. Check the box that I gave you a policy to the CEO, and let's just have a day of it. Well, if that was my knee jerk, and I actually own the Department of Radiology, how hard do you think it was to get a nurse to go in there, or an ER faculty member, or a revenue cycle? Because this wasn't even their burden to bear at this moment. So what I had to do is, first of all, explain to everybody the difference between our current downtime policy and what the ask is from our leadership. So the truth is, and I'm not proud to say this, but our current downtime policy, if we're down for a few hours, anything between a couple of minutes to 2 hours. If we're down, we really don't do anything. I mean, we don't deploy radiologists to the campuses. We don't deploy them to the modalities. No news is good news. They're looking at images if they can on PACS or our backup PACS, and they will call the ER or they'll call the unit if they see something. But it literally is the no news is good news type of workflow. Anyone else? Okay, I mean, you're only down for a few hours. So we have a trigger point in our downtime policy. If our systems are down for greater than 2 hours, then we start deploying a radiologist to every campus and every ER to sit by the CT scanners if necessary to read off the scanner. But we don't even pull that trigger until we're down for at least 2 hours. So I had to explain to them the scenario that we're looking at here. Oh, this is where I was going to add another slide. The scenario we're looking at here is 30 days. So we created, just like you do in the military, we created the exercise. The exercise that we created was that we have no network, no way of sending images from the modality to PACS. We do have some phone technology, even if it was a cell phone, a personal cell phone, but we have no way to send images from the modalities to PACS. That was number one. Number two, because IT was at the table and we had done this full inventory of all of our at-risk equipment, right there we identified which we had portable x-rays that were at significant risk. Very, very old software. Our CTs were okay, our MRIs were okay, but the portables were at risk because they're the oldest pieces of equipment. So we said, okay, these equipment is out of commission, and we've been cyber attacked. You still have access though to the modality, because there are some cyber attacks where they will lock your modality down and you can't actually utilize it. So understand that. And why did we pick this exercise, this particular exercise? Because based from my IT colleagues, they said that was the most common event that is happening across the country. So taking the 80% rule, let's talk about what's the most probable scenario we're going to find ourselves in. So the exercise was, we're completely down, no communication between the modalities and PACS for 30 days. That was the exercise, that was the ask. So, like I said, what we did, first of all, we looked at, okay, if we cannot network images via, the network, how do we get them read? This is why it was very important to have the doctors at the table. So questions were asked. The frontline staff asked this question, well, why can't I just burn it on a CD? Because we can. Most of our equipment can burn on a CD or a USB port. We said, okay, let's stop there. Let's go and find out every piece of equipment and see how we can extract the images from that equipment. So this was actually going to the modalities. Some of them did CDs, some of them did USBs, some, because the files like IR and like MAMOs, sometimes you have to do like a DVD because the files are so big with all the recons and so forth. So we stopped there. Everyone deployed, had a set of equipment that they had to go get, and they had their equipment list. They had to find that piece of equipment. They had to figure out how to take images off of the machine itself. So now we have a log. We have an Excel file that says CT1, CT2, CT3. These are USB exportable. Okay, so now we have that. We actually, and so at first, and I'm going to tell, I put down here, validate, validate, validate. This is not the time to say, oh, it has a USB, I'm sure it works. You need to validate it before the cyber attack. Maybe there's something wrong with it. We don't know. You don't want to find that out when you're in the middle of a cyber attack.
Maybe it's turned off for cyber.
And maybe it's turned off. And maybe it is, exactly. So we took the list, we separated by campuses, Every modality had a list of equipment they had to go find, and they actually had to put hands on it and see, does it work? They reported back the next week. We found out exactly which means of exporting we could do. Okay, so now we know we can take the images off the modality. We know what we need to take it off. What do we do with that? Right now, all of our sections are separated. So chest is in one area of the building, body is in another area. MSK is off-site. PD, depends. There's only 2 people, so it's on one of 4 campuses at that day. So one of the things we came up with very quickly is that that's not going to work. We're not going to be able to take this to different locations of the system and get it read. So having the radiologist in the room was important. Okay, so this is the first time we're going to have multidisciplinary reading rooms, or unless you have a jack of all trades radiologist. So I'm old school, and they used to have jack of all trade radiologists that could read anything, not an academic medical center. So you have to ask yourself ahead of time, can your doctors read anything that comes in front of them or not? So what we did is said, okay, we're going to have multidisciplinary reading rooms. Radiologists understand that. Okay. Now, how do we get this into a reading station for them to look at? So we actually had to test it with these USBs and put them in our PACS computers to find out, can I pull them out? Can I pull them out and actually look at them? And yes, we could. Think about it though. I said 400, they read 437,000 a year. How realistic is it? What kind of disruption is that reading room going to look like? And also, no offense, but I don't know all these radiologists. I don't see them on a day-to-day basis. And if I don't, you would think my CT tech does? So how are we going to identify who's chest, who's body, who's MSK? So one of the other things that we talked about doing was, and I'll show you a picture of it in a little bit, we actually said, okay, if we're going to have a multidisciplinary reading room, we need some kind of signage so anyone who's coming in knows who's what specialty in that reading room. A couple of things that we also talked about was, okay, think about it. And in fact, I would love to find out from you, if you don't mind, how did you get notified that you were under a cyber attack with that initial notification?
An email.
Okay.
Said we're under a cyber attack. You'll notice the network's not up.
Phone started ringing by or emails saying, hey, I mean, there were several things that we didn't have cyber attack, we had a network.
Okay.
Ethic wasn't crossing. Certain things just kind of popping up.
Okay.
I call the help desk. I see it all the time. I asked up all my IT and said, hey, man, you got this issue. Open the ticket, start. And they did within 3 hours. Within an hour, they were on it.
Gone. It was gone. Oh no, it's back up.
Offsite server,
they got it back up in 4 hours. Okay. Okay. And then, and that's why we're going to talk about that command center. Yeah. Okay. Same, exactly. Sometimes it pays to be old. So how long?
Just 100 hospitals.
Oh, just 100. Yeah.
I didn't hit all 200.
So you got an email that's saying it was down.
Yes.
Okay. So click here. Okay. Okay. So one of the asks were in building this policy, this workflow, was who pulls the trigger on this action plan. We had to make it where everyone knew what their role was. The moment we said, okay, we are in cyber attack, pull the trigger. Even the frontline staff knew exactly what they needed to do. So the first thing that the frontline staff came up with, each of these CTs and MRs, they have a number of cases they can hold on their modality. And so those have already been read. We said immediately clean the queues. And because I'm going to come back to it in a second, it's going to take a little bit of time to deploy I call them our go bags, but they're go boxes with our cyber attack tools and resources in it. So that's the first thing the techs do. They clean their queues so that they can store images on it until we figure out and get all the CDs out and all the USBs out and so forth. So that's one of the first things that they do. The imaging command center, we did say we need a central point, not just a central reading room, but think about it. If there is no Epic, if there's no network to receive orders, and you have 4 hospitals, you have in that one hospital, the academic medical center, there's 7 buildings with patients. we needed to centralize. So that's the first thing we said, we're going to set up an imaging command center. We're going to, hopefully, if we have a phone, we're going to have a single phone line. We'll have a central location to ingest all imaging requests. And then we were going to deploy staff to the floors to pick them up. Old school imaging. Do you remember when you had paper requests? We were going back to that same concept. Put a basket at the nurse's station. You have a paper request that goes in there. We would send a runner every hour, every 2 hours to each section and pick up the paper request, bring it down to the imaging command center for distribution. Like I said, sometimes it does pay to be old. So now we know what equipment was going to be vulnerable, which ones we were going to have to take offline completely. We know how to get the images off of the modality. We know how to get them into a PACS to view via CD or DVD. So let's start talking about how would this all work. And this is where it was really important to have the nurses in the room from the ICU and the ER. And I'm going to tell you there's two different processes we came up. For the ER was something different because we're a level 1 trauma center. And then the inpatient units were different. So this is the form that we have, that we had even before this exercise, our X-ray consult epic downtime form. It's the same exact form. We actually started looking at it because we never really had to use it before. Originally, it only had the top copy and it had one extra carbon copy underneath, one. So we started thinking, okay, so how is this going to work? So ICU, let's just take you. If you fill this out, what are you going to be responsible for? They're going to be responsible for the majority of it. And it has all the stuff that we need later on for billing and for reconciliation. It has who's asking for the exam, what department or service are they in, their pager number, their phone number, what's the priority, what kind of x-rays are they asking for, clinical history, reason for exam, primary diagnosis. So it's everything on this top portion, including the diagnosis code, is the nurse's responsibility. Okay, so we talked to ICU, we said, okay, you're filling this out, you're putting it in the basket, who's going to get it to radiology? We determined that because, I'm jumping around a little bit because it was this chaotic, but we're not going to have all our services open during a cyber attack. We had those crucial conversations. We had those crucial conversations with our hospital executives. We had the conversations with our clinics. We had the conversations with our ERs. Immediately, we're going to be shutting down routine outpatient services. And just like COVID, guys, just like COVID. If it was just a routine and you can wait, don't do it. If it's something that's medically urgent or medically emergent, yes, we're going to keep doing it. So all of those employees who are doing screening mammograms, who are doing the lung cancer screenings, who are doing different areas that we're probably going to be affected by closing down our outpatients, we're going to redeploy them into other positions, just like we did in COVID. Just like we did in COVID. Guess what? There was a lot of imaging people who were manning the front doors, making sure people had their masks on and things like that. So these are going to be runners. They're going to go up to the floors. They're going to get these images these requests out of the baskets, and they're going to bring it down to the imaging command center. So this is why it was important for us to have an imaging command center. This is our Galveston campus only. All of the red are places that we have patient beds. Currently, imaging is in the blue. So we had to have that conversation. Where are we going to set this up then? Do we set our imaging command center up where the patients are? Do we set it up where imaging is? So we said, no, we're going to set it up where imaging is, but we're going to deploy our employees to go to each of those floors on an hourly basis during the day and pick up those requests. They'll bring them down to imaging, and then they'll redeploy them to the modalities there in our department. So this is a larger picture of the request. The floor said yes, they would be responsible, and rightfully so, for filling out all of it in red. That's their responsibility. They would bring it down to the imaging command center. Our runner would take it to the CT scanner, the MRI scanner, and let them know, hey, these are your requests, and they'll figure out how to get the patients down. At the modalities, and this is very similar to what you may have during your current downtime policy, we do have an imaging downtime log. So every portable machine, every CT scanner, every ultrasound, every MR, every day would have a log, and they would log their patients that they're doing that day. On it, it's a lot of the same things. They just say the patient's information, what exam they did, what machines they did it on, was it inpatient, outpatient, or ER, the exam performed, what time did they start, what time did they end, and who did they exam. basic information that's going to be important when we go back afterwards and start reconciling it. Bigger picture here. Downtime numbers. I don't know if on your current downtime policy, if a new patient was to come in and we can't build it in the EMR for whatever reason, they are assigned a patient number. If they have an MRN and we can have access to it, the MRN, patient history. So the technologist fills all of this out up until this line. And I'll explain to you what happens after that, because that's the part that's going to come up when we finally get back our systems, right? So RCO. One thing, okay, so we have the form. We've got the request, we got the form to the modality, the exam is being done. But like I said, if you're thinking about this from a true cyber attack and you're going to be down, the exercise was 30 days. You're going to be down for 30 days. You're not going to have access to your network for 30 days. RCO made it very clear we cannot close our billing cycle, because it may not be 30, it may be 6 months, it may be 3 months. We cannot go that long without dropping some bills. So with their input, what they suggested, and this is something I just pulled off the web, but you can create your own, that on that form, oh, let me see, I think go to the next one. On this form, when the technologist does their exam, they're going to actually have to write CPT codes in here. Okay? They actually have to write CPT, and our techs don't know CPT codes. So another important part of this at the modality is that we would have a log based on the modality that has the most common CPT codes. So they write the date, they write the exam code, what machine they put it on, begin and end time, number of films, repeats of the text initials. So now, guess what? Remember, I only had 2 copies of this originally. So now with RCO's feedback, they said, no, let's change that form to 3. I need one of those copies so I can still drop my bills. And they have everything on this form now that they can do it. So the form has made it down. The images are done. They're burned on a USB or a CD. The form comes to the radiologist reading room. We have these signs up on the multidisciplinary reading room where we know who's going to be reading what. And yes, there are some doctors that still can read pretty much anything. So yes, my goal is to have an anything form at least in that room for our runners. There's going to be a person in the reading room that's going to be a reading room assistant. And their job is to be loading those packs. So the doctors are not going to sit. This was another operational change that we did not expect. Because of the amount of time, because we tested it, it takes to put a USB in, load the images into packs for a doctor to view. We were going to have one extra reading station, and the doctors would come around to the reading station to read it. Okay, because otherwise he's going to sit there. We're going to load it, and he's not doing anything while we're loading the images. So that was an idea that the radiologist came up with. But so now the radiologists have read it. They're going to handwrite their diagnosis or what they saw on it. They're going to date it, time it. I was really surprised. This is why it's important to have them in the room, because I really thought initially we were going down all these rabbit holes about the radiologist coming to the modality. The radiologist, can we hook up a PowerScribe mic to a non-PACS computer and have them dictate into that so that he doesn't have to do the rework later. We went down so many IT rabbit holes trying to make life for the radiologist easier. Because that's usually what we have to do. I mean, they don't want to be disrupted. But having the radiologist in the room and listening to all the I don't want to say destruction, but the discombobulation that we're going to have to go through, they took that step and they said, no, we're going to go ahead and just write it out on the paper. Don't do all this IT stuff for us. We'll just, if we have to read off the modality, we'll read off the modality, and that's what they're going to end up doing ER, or we'll read in this reading room. We'll load them up. If we have to load them up ourselves, we'll load them up ourselves. We'll write your report on this documentation. That was a blessing that we did not expect. It was a blessing. But having that conversation now, when we're not under a cyber attack, allowed us to have that relationship and build that solution together versus trying to do it in the middle of chaos. And that's why I'm saying over and over again, plan ahead, plan for the worst possible scenario. So the radiologist has written his report. Now what do we do with this report? It pays to be old, people. So what we decided to do is make an old-fashioned film library in that reading room. So these manila envelopes, we would put, and this is another cost discussion we had to have. On these USBs, we could put multiple patients' information on. There's enough space, right? But if you think about it toward the end, how are you going to know which USB has which patient? So the smarter decision that we made collectively was that one CD, one USB per patient, no matter what. Because then you can put your CD in your manila envelope, you put one of the copies of your report in the manila envelope, and that is going to start your patient's medical file, your imaging medical file. And so you take this down a little bit further. So there's 3 copies to this form. The original one is going to go with the patient, but with the patient to the floor or to the ER. So they have a copy of the report, and more than likely what they're going to do is they're going to go to old-fashioned binders for their charts, patient charts. The yellow copy is going to stay in imaging. So think about it. If we don't have, maybe a doctor is, he's on another campus and he's still caring or being consulted for a patient in Galveston, right? Who is he going to call? He could call the floor and see, because there's a copy of the report with the patient on the floor, but oftentimes they still call the reading room. So it's important that the reading room has a list or has a copy of all of these reports when they get that phone call. So one copy is going to stay in the reading room. We decided that we would have these accordion files that we would put the daily reports in. The pink copy is attached to the images. It goes in the manila envelope with the USB, and we store them in boxes. At the end of the day, the ones that are in the accordion file go to medical records for billing. It seems discombobulated, but it would work. We would have a film library, we have archived images, we have a report, we have a way to bill it, we have a way to retrieve it if asked. That was the thing. If a doctor called us and said, I need Angie Bush's results for her CT scan that was done yesterday. If you don't think about that scenario, how are you going to retrieve it? That's why we went away from the USBs being, even though the cost effectiveness would be cheaper if we put multiple patients on it, we would not be able to retrieve it as easily if we had to. So the ones that are in these accordion files would be stored in, we're thinking 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Those accordion files would be stored by date and by campus in these, I don't know what they're called, like legal boxes or something. Legal boxes, yeah. So we would end up creating an old-fashioned film library is what it's going to be. But, this is the same thing. We'll have CDs, USBs, DVDs. We had to figure out how many we were going to need of this on hand. So the other thing was we wanted to have a go bag of sorts. So the moment you got that email that says, hey, we're under cyber attack, or your phone starts dinging that, hey, we've lost our network, we wanted to be able to immediately grab that box, put it in the command center, and deploy all the supplies. So what we did was we needed to figure out how many CDs are we going to need, how many DVDs are we going to need, how many USBs are we going to need. This is where the discussion then said, okay, we're going to shut down all of our outpatient services that are elective. So we took and we actually quantified how many inpatients and ER exams we do on a daily basis on average. And we purchased enough ahead of time for 2 weeks. So every campus right now has their own go box. It has enough CDs and DVDs, and then we have the list of which modalities need what in that go box. It has the manila envelopes and 2 weeks worth of requisitions. Every radiology director's office in the system has that go box ready. And not only that, we also know exactly how many we have to order for every 2 weeks at a time. Because it cost us not a lot of money, but it was an investment to buy that many CDs, USBs, folders, and everything ahead of time. But the security that it gave my team, that they knew what their role was going to do, or what their role was going to be, and the security they gave our CEO and our nursing staff that imaging can continue. We can continue to provide operations, was worth the investment that we made. So it wasn't 1 month worth. We decided to just go with 2 weeks and then have the reorder forms already in there. So every staff member knows exactly how many more CDs, what's the order number, the forms, what's the order number for the forms and for the boxes. I missed some slides. So let's talk about reconciliation before we go to the summary. So reconciliation, I'm gonna take you back to that form. So eventually we're gonna come back up, right? How long were you down? About a month, okay. So eventually we're gonna come back up. The question then came is, what do we do with all these images, all these paper reports once we get back up? How are we gonna get them back into PACS permanently? And with the report, are we gonna ask our radiologist to reread every single one now that we have a network? The answer was no. So as a collective unit, we decided what we're gonna do. Oh, wrong slide, hold on. So what we're gonna do is the USBs will be used. The images are in PACS. We're gonna scan this document as an image. And the reason we decided to do as an image versus in the scanned documents is that we wanted to make it sure that the patient may have had multiple imaging. And so if you're going to go, and I don't know if you know, but with Epic, at least those scan documents, there's not enough tags in there to actually know what it is that's scanning. You would have to go through a whole bunch. So working with the doctors, both the radiologists and the ordering providers in the ER and in the floors, we decided that it would be easier if we could just make this an image in PACS. So when they open the file, it says Angie Bush's CT. One of those images is that written report. So we met RCO's requirement. We've got the images, we've got a report, and they dropped the bills for it. So from an RCO standpoint, they felt they were compliant with any type of requirements to be able to drop that bill to the patient. But that's what we were going to do. We would get to the patient's chart, put the images in, scan these documents, and then that doctors don't have to go back and do rework again. Okay. Now the form, as the imaging director, how am I going to know that this was actually accomplished? That's why these forms were so important. These are going to be collected on a daily basis. Every day we start a new one. At the end of this form, we added this column that says reconcile, yes or no, and if no, why, and who was a reconciling technologist. So once these images are in PACS and the report is in PACS, then we're going to check this off. So now if I get audited by an outside organization that says you dropped all these bills, how do you know that these exams got done? How do you know there's a report? I can pull out this.